welcome, welcome. This is my Lunch and Learn series that will be happening every Thursday, if I can help it, from noon Eastern time, 12 to 12:30. And the way I structured the session is to take about 30 minutes where I will be talking. I will be sharing a lot of information, but I have blocked out about an hour for this session. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to stay after and talk through some of the things that we've talked about. And since this is a smaller group, feel free to ask any questions. If you ever can't see my screen or hear me, please let me know. I have a couple of videos that I want to share too. So we'll do a quick sound check to make sure that everybody can hear and see. So let's jump into it. I'm going to go through really quickly just about Recon Night Tactical Defense and what we do. And then I'm going to go through our actual lunch and learn where we're going to be talking about defense thinking. And I'm really excited to share with you some insights that I've been learning and that I've lived in my life. And that is a lot of research in terms of what I've been looking at in this space. So I'm excited to share that with you today. And every week we're going to be building off of what I talked about usually the week before. So next week, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the end of this session, I'm going to build off of some key points that I make today. So Recon Night Tactical Defense, what we do is practical self-defense and active shooter training for the workplace, churches, and schools. And what we do is we want to empower the workforce, students, and educators to utilize everyday tactical techniques through the power of preparation, not the power of fear. These are our goals. We want to teach individuals methods to unleash fear through the art of preparation and appropriate aggression training. We also want to help employees and educators really take back control and be able to thrive in their space without this constant thinking about what may happen and what would I do if this happens. But really giving people just some insight in terms of what to think about and how they can plan, right? And really use the tools and methods that are out there to predict human behavior. And I'm going to talk about some of the research behind that. And there have been leading federal and local agencies that are really ramping up their research and information and tools and guidance that they're giving to the general public. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the research that has come out really since Columbine and what it's looking like and how it's building. One of our other goals is also to just encourage organizations and schools to use something called radical belonging as a violence reduction methodology. And I'll talk about that today, some of the things that the Secret Service found in their research in terms of creating belonging, especially in schools, and how connection really is a key deterrent of violence in schools. And I think that's just one of the most incredible findings that I've come across in terms of really tying radical belonging into scientific studies on how to use it as a violence reduction methodology. And then finally, teaching violence prevention, self-defense, and conducting active shooter trainings without creating traumas. That's another body of knowledge that we dig into is we don't want to re-traumatize people. It's not about, hey, hit the floor and loud shots and all of those things that are very relevant. But for what we're trying to do here is we want to create a holistic way of teaching how to survive active shooters without really traumatizing everybody. So it really is made for corporations, it's made for universities, and we have research-driven, trauma-informed pedagogy that we use to deliver that and stand upon that promise. So this is a little bit about me. For those of you who I might not know, or you may not know me, or we haven't worked together before, my name is Abigail Baker. Some of you who have worked with me might know some of this, maybe not all of it, but this is really my composition. So in the center, you'll see some of my professional traits. I'm an instructional designer, I'm an HR and communications leader. I have a bachelor's degree in people and global organizations, so I've done a lot of studying around those two domains. And I have a master's degree in applied professional studies, and my concentration was business and also creative writing and things like that. Now, circling that, I've spent more than 7 years in the martial arts space, practicing Muay Thai, mixed martial arts. I'm a ranked Krav Maga fighter. I'm a certified ICSU and Hero 1 instructor, which those are both Krav systems. I'm a ranked Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter. I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for over 7 years now. I've also taken formal de-escalation trainings when I worked in the public school system in Albuquerque. And I've been doing weapons training now for a couple of years, and this includes handguns, knives, sticks, things like that. Now, in the courses that I teach, we do not go that deep into combat training. The only thing that I might do is maybe some movement drills and then observational techniques where you can disarm, shooters if they have a handgun, depending on the type of weapon that they have. So I do more observational, but this type of training really helps me in terms of my own discipline and my defense thinking, right? So thinking about tactics that I would use in different scenarios, and it's just been a part of my life for a really long time. So I talked about this part just a couple of minutes ago about utilizing research-driven trauma-informed pedagogy practices. And this is really our promise, is that we can teach violence prevention without recreating trauma. So these are a couple of quotes from a study that 2 very renowned experts did on teaching trauma without causing trauma. And I just wanted to pull these 2 quotes. One of them is, clinical educators provide evidence that it is possible to safely integrate trauma into curriculum and teach students how to effectively listen and respond to pain. And these are part of our core tenets. The second quote I want to read is, teaching about trauma is essential to comprehending and confronting the human experience, but to honor the humanity and dignity of both trauma's victims and those who are learning about them, education must proceed with compassion and responsibility towards both. And that is also part of our core tenets. It's compassion and responsibility, not sharing things just to be sensational, but really, really digging deep and thinking what we're sharing and limiting exposure as well. And I have a disclaimer that I'm going to read in just a couple of slides here. So what we do is we actually serve ready asynchronous self-defense and active shooter modules for learning management systems. And I do virtual and in-person 60 to 90-minute workshops. I also do half-day or full-day seminars. We do live in-person active shooter trainings and drills for schools, for churches, for places of work. And we do warning signs trainings for HR teams, managers, and educators. And that's really where we dig into the radical belonging concept and also diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is a quick disclaimer that I'd like to read. And for anyone watching as well, please make sure to note this. This session will contain discussion, images, and video around topics of violence and mass shootings that may disturb some. Our trauma-informed teaching protocols require short sessions and consistent wellness check-ins throughout. Relevant materials that are not meant to be graphic in nature but used for teaching purposes will be used. All participants can and should leave the session at any time if they do feel triggered. So let's jump into it. Defense thinking, identifying potential threats. We're also going to be talking about the Columbine effect, adopting a survival mindset, and the Stockdale paradox. Let me just remind you that it's not so much about prediction as it is about prevention. And this is something that is a common theme in the research that I've been looking at, is building this single profile of who a mass shooter is really can't be done. Now, there are a lot of common themes that really renowned researchers have been looking at since Columbine, right? But what they're saying is we have to be more focused on prevention versus building this single profile, right, of who a mass shooter might be. And also, if you think about all the soft targets that are now high risk, and a soft target is basically a place that has little to no security. So soft targets would be a concert, right, places of work, celebrations, parades, those types of things. There are so many different types of rationales, like we've seen in the Buffalo shooting, the Uvalde shooting. We've also seen different places. So you have K through 12. We have colleges and universities. We have places of work. We have commercial places like Walmart, right? Buffalo, the FedEx shooting. So they're all different profiles and all different motivators. So it's very hard to build one single profile. But I do have 5 that I will go over today because it's good information and there's some common themes there. But I just really want to drive it home that it's really very, very much about prevention and not building just that single profile. Now let's look at the definition of an active shooter. And again, as I start to dig into this, please make sure to excuse yourself if you're feeling triggered. If some of this is overwhelming you, if you're feeling signs of stress, such as headaches, blurry vision, sweaty palms, if you're feeling anxious, please do excuse yourself. And if you do want to come back, this session will be recorded and you can watch it just in smaller pieces. So I encourage you to do a quick self-check-in. So the definition of an active shooter, this is according to the Homeland Security Active Shooter Response Book that was done by the US Department of Homeland Security. An active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, and there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to victims. Because active shooter situations are often over within 10 to 15 minutes before law enforcement arrives on the scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. And again, this is literally from the Homeland Security Active Shooter Response Book. Now, in this era, so we're talking about post-Columbine, there is a new breed of attacker. There's a new breed of shooter that now lives in America that really didn't exist before Columbine. There were different types of killings, but this mass shooter and this type and this style of killing was really not popular. So within the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group, there exists the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime. Now, in early 1981, so this is after the assassination of John Lennon, the Secret Service asked Robert Fiend, who is a forensic psychologist, and Brian Bosco to write a paper on mentally ill assassins. Now, there were so many similarities that they took from assassins who targeted people like celebrities and political figures that the FBI asked them to apply these tactics and their same research techniques to mass shooters, specifically school shootings, right? So they really got involved in terms of researching why does this happen and how can we stop it? And this information came from the University of Virginia's Critical Incident Analysis Group, who really did a lot of research in this space and put it out to the public. Now, this is one of the study findings that I want to share. Many of the assassins and would-be assassins simply felt invisible. So these are the interviews, right, that Field and Bosco have done with countless assassins from pre-Columbine to post-Columbine. And what they're saying is that most assassins felt invisible. And I really want you to listen to that, because in the back of your head, I really want us to be thinking about radical belonging, right? And it's not just a fluffy feeling, it's something that could save lives. So as we look through these study findings, definitely think about that and let that ruminate. In the year before their attacks, most assassins struggled with acute reversals and disappointment in their lives, which the paper argues was a true motive. They didn't want to see themselves as non-entities, or they didn't want to see themselves as simply being kind of nobodies, if there's a lack of a better term. Now, this is a great quote by Fiend. They experienced failure after failure after failure and decided that rather being a nobody, they wanted to be a somebody. The next piece that I want to share with you is another assumption that people make about assassins or mass shooters is that they're insane, right? They do it because they are crazy. People completely divorced from reality. But this study, to a degree, rejects that idea as being far too simplistic. 44% had a history of depression, 43% had a history of delusional ideas, and 21% heard voices. Now, Robert Fien points out the way these people sought to address what they saw as their main problems, which were anonymity and failure, wasn't inherently crazy. Now, let's look at the Columbine effect. And I have a short snippet that I want to show you. So I'm going to try to navigate over to there because, and I can put, so anything that I talk about in this session, please message me in the chat or afterwards if you want the reference for it. I choose to not show some things because I feel like they're too graphic, right? So with this video, this is an excellent piece put out by the FBI, and it really breaks down Columbine, what happened, and the research that was sparked from that. I'm going to show you about 60 seconds of it. If you want to see the full 30-minute video, please let me know, and I will get that to you. I can post it, send me your email address as well, and I can send you any references that you'd like and do follow-ups. But I will warn you that it is very difficult to watch. Very difficult. Incredible information, hard to watch. So let's see if I might have to stop my share and reshare. So bear with me for just a moment, because it is a different experience when you can actually hear it and see it. And hopefully, if you cannot see, I haven't played the video yet, but when I start the video, if you can't hear it, please let me know.
Prevent anything like this from happening again.
2 decades later, what have we learned? What do we know about confronting this kind of attack? And how do we keep it from happening again? Today, Columbine continues to resonate with a new breed of shooter, inspiring a cult-like following of those who see Columbine as a kind of twisted blueprint to follow and surpass. Columbine is seen as the origin story for many of the attacks that followed. They call it the Columbine effect.
Columbine effect is really a psychological footprint of what it does to people. This event occurs and it becomes mystical to many people, to the point that they want to make a pilgrimage just to see Columbine High School, or they want to become part of the Columbine mentality, or they want to become a Columbine shooter.
Okay, so hopefully everybody was able to hear that. Okay, but that was really what I wanted you to get out of it, was the new breed of shooter, and that there is something that is called the Columbine effect. So if you keep watching the video, it goes into some of these things that we'll see here, right? So it really breaks down the profile that the FBI is trying to build about school shooters. They are injustice collectors. That's one term that they use. They often have no criminal history. They have some kind of mental health issue. And this could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be loneliness, right? And it could be something deeper, maybe schizophrenia, things like that. They often have instability in their home life. They're fascinated with previous attacks. So if you keep watching the video, they show videos of other shooters, really how Columbine became this safe refuge and this place where other shooters wanted to be. The black trench coats, the backwards hat, the combat boots, like literally this whole persona was something that other school shooters have started to embody. And there's actually a whole book called Trigger Points that talk about some of these scenarios in other schools and what schools did to prevent attacks. Often school shooters demonstrate pre-attack behavior indicators, and this is something that is also very prominent in the workplace. They often say something to somebody, right? And so it might not be full admittance, but there are usually pre-attack behaviors where there are statements made. Maybe there's, you know, they pretend that they're joking around about something, but they may not actually be joking. So learning how to identify pre-attack behavior indicators is actually a big part of prevention. Looking for behavior changes, aggression, dehumanization, disengagement. So the reason why I'm talking about this in terms of defense thinking is that we have to really have a knowledge of what we're dealing with. And that's why I'm presenting all this research to you, is so that you can kind of have in your head, okay, there is something called the Columbine effect. There are things called, you know, pre-attack behaviors. I can look for changes in behavior in the people around me, whether it's at school, whether it's at work, at church, no matter where you are. So this is why this is very much part of defense thinking, is knowing about these things and telling your kids about these things. Are there levels of aggression? Are there coworkers that are one day seem to be, you know, passive, and the other day are showing serious signs of aggression that really just trigger your gut feeling? And when you have that gut feeling, what do you do, right? And so that's why I'm talking a little bit about just this headspace. Now, the Violence Project, funded by the National Institute of Justice, which is the research arm of the Department of Justice. Jillian Peterson is an associate professor of criminology at Homeland University, and James Densley is a professor of criminal justice at Metro State. And they constructed a database of every mass shooter since 1966 who shot and killed 4 or more people in a public place. And every shooting incident at schools and workplaces and places of worship since 1999. They published a book called The Violence Project: How to Stop a Mass Shooting Epidemic, which revealed striking commonalities among the perpetrators of mass shootings. This is one of the quotes that I want to read to you. And it says, there's this really consistent pathway. Early childhood trauma seems to be the foundation, whether violence in the home, sexual assault, parental suicides, extreme bullying, whatever it may be. Then you see the build toward hopelessness, despair, isolation, self-loathing, oftentimes rejection from peers. That turns into a really identifiable crisis point where people are acting or start acting differently. Sometimes they have previous suicide attempts. What's different from traditional suicide is that the self-hate turns against a group. They start asking themselves, whose fault is this? Is it a radical group or women or a religious group, or is it my classmates? The hate turns outward. There's also this quest for fame and notoriety. So we're seeing the themes, right? These common things of rejection, of not belonging, of self-loathing and isolation. And this is why radical belonging is part of what we teach as violence prevention. Now, quick time check. We got started a little bit late. It's 12:30. I'm going to keep going. I have about 15 more minutes. If you have questions, raise your hand and I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, if you have a little bit of extra time to stay on, I would love to have you. Just want to be respectful of everyone's time. And of course, this will be recorded and you can watch it later if you weren't able to catch one part of the session, or if you do have to drop now. So the 5 profiles of mass shooters, I mentioned this in the beginning of the conversation. Again, this is not about building that one single profile. This is about prevention. But this did come out of some of the studies that have been done. And I think it's important to note it, take it with a grain of salt, and kind of put it in our entire arsenal of defense thinking that we are trying to build for ourselves, right? So these are the 5 profiles of mass shooters that we know as of now. Now, this came from Vice in 2019. And we have to remember, this is pre-pandemic. So personally, I believe that a lot of this has shifted, but the data has not come out yet since the pandemic has taken a toll on our economy, on our mental health. And so just think about that as well. So these are the 5 profiles that we somewhat know of as of now. K through 12 shooters, those are people who target elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, are often white males, typically students or former students of the school with a history of trauma. Most are suicidal, plan their crime extensively, and make others aware of their plans at some point before the shooting. Now, the suicidal portion is important because that impacts motivation. a lot of times it's not killing others, but it's that they want to commit suicide by police. And so knowing that is also a critical part of defense thinking. College and university shooters, non-white males who are current students of the university, are suicidal and have a history of violence and childhood trauma. They typically obtain guns or handguns legally and leave behind some sort of manifesto. Workplace shooters, often 40-something males without a specific racial profile. Most are employees of their targeted location, often a blue-collar job site, and have some grievance against the workplace. This is really where I spend a lot of time talking, because we have to treat people better no matter what. And we have to do it to prevent risk, right? And this is really where I want to empower HR teams to really think about how are we terminating people, making sure that we have an inclusive organization, again, to prevent violence and to prevent things like this from happening. Place of worship shooters, typically white males in their 40s, typically motivated by hate or domestic violence that spills out into the public. Shooters at a commercial location, such as a grocery store or restaurant, typically white men in their 30s with a violent history and a criminal record. They typically have no connection to the targeted location and use a single legally obtained firearm. So those are a few profiles. Again, this is just one piece of the puzzle. This is not the answer. Prevention is the way to go, not prediction. So let's talk about adopting a survival mindset during times of crisis. The US Department of Homeland Security stated that adopting a survival mindset is necessary in surviving active shooter scenarios. But what exactly does that mean? The survival mindset is knowing that human behavior is predictable, right? So we learned about pre-attack behaviors. We learned about different mentalities. There's also things that people write online in manifestos, there's videos. So knowing that, that we're not completely powerless, that's really what it is really what cultivates a survival mindset. And this is something that the US Department of Homeland Security has stated. We have to have a survival mindset in order to survive these types of attacks. The other part is be a person of action. Who are you? When things happen in public, right? And it could be minor, maybe it's minor verbal altercations. What do you do? And I'm not encouraging you to run into the middle of every altercation that you see. That is not a survival mindset. But what I want you to do is just take a note of what you're thinking and feeling and what your body is doing. Because if 100% of the time, right, you think that someone else will deal with it, I don't know if that's the best way to go, right? There may be times, depending on a wide variety of factors, that it's best for you to engage. And when I say engage, there are varying levels of engagement. Engaging could simply be, hey, I'm going to take my cell phone and call the police. I don't know if anyone else did. I'm going to do it. Engaging could be, hey, I'm in a store. I'm going to just go walk over, get store security. Engaging could be, you know what? I'm going to sit back. I'm actually not going to rush to my car. I'm going to watch. Maybe I'll take a picture and a video. Or the best thing might be to exit and get as far away from that scenario as possible. But you just have to take action and know why you're doing it and what the best approach is. Take responsibility. Sometimes it could come down to you. It could. And just knowing that will help you survive. Practice noticing. When you walk around, when you're at the gym, where's the best place to go if someone came in through the front door and did start shooting? Is the electrical room open? What's the layout of locker rooms? Where could you go? What's glass? What's solid? What things are around that could potentially be a barrier? So just taking some notes when you walk into your workplace, when you walk into a mall, when you walk into a movie theater, where are your exits? Do you try to sit near an exit? Practice noticing. Look for pathways. Think about multiple things, right? So you might not be able to get through the front door of your gym. What about the electrical room? Is it often kept open or is it often locked? Are there other rooms? What about the employee room? Again, look for other pathways and things that might not be, specifically out in the open for you to consider. The Stockdale paradox is probably one of the most prominent ways of really grasping the survival mindset. And I have a quick video for you that I'm going to show.
I would like to give you a way of thinking that has been enormously helpful to me, that came from the Good to Great research for dealing with great difficulty. And it was what we came to call the Stockdale paradox. And the Stockdale paradox was taught to us by, when we were doing the Good to Great research, we're trying to make sense of the CEOs. And in doing that, I just by chance happened to get to know Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was the highest ranking military officer in the Hanoi Hilton, shot down in 1967, was there till 1974. They could pull him out at any time and torture him, and they did. He was tortured over 20 times. And I had the privilege to get to know Admiral Stockdale, and we were going to the faculty club one day, and I had read his book In Love and War, which was written in alternating chapters by himself and his wife about their years when he was in the camp. And I got depressed reading the book because it seemed so bleak, it seemed so difficult, it seemed, it's like we can all endure anything if we know it's going to come to an end and we know when. But what if you don't know if it's ever going to come to an end? And you certainly don't know when. So I asked Admiral Stockdale how he dealt with that, and he said, you have to realize I never got depressed because I never, ever wavered in my faith that not only I would get out, but I would turn being in the camp into the defining event of my life that in retrospect I would not trade. Later, when we were up the hill, I asked him, I said, Admiral Stockdale, who didn't make it out as strong as you? And he said, easy, it was the optimists. I said, the optimists? You sounded optimistic. He said, no, I was not optimistic. I never wavered in my faith that I would prevail in the end, but I was not optimistic. I said, what's the difference? Well, the optimists always thought we'd be out by Christmas. Of course, Christmas would come and it would go. And then we were going to be out by Easter and Thanksgiving, and then Christmas would come again, and they died of a broken heart. And that's when Admiral Stockdale grabbed me by the shoulders and said, this is what I learned. When you're imprisoned by great calamity, by great difficulty, by great uncertainty, you have to, on the one hand, never confuse the need for unwavering faith that you will find a way to prevail in the end, with, on the other hand, the discipline to confront the most brutal facts we actually face. And we're not getting out of here by Christmas.
That is, I don't think I can say it any better than that. So let's look at a summary of the Stockdale paradox that came out of the Good to Great research. James Stockdale, Admiral James Stockdale, survived 7.5 years as a prisoner in Vietnam because he embraced reality and disregarded comfort. The keys to his survival mindset were faith, a sense of purpose, and being able to accept circumstances as they are, but without despair. Being able to control your reactions under pressure is a skill set that takes practice. So work on cultivating these attitudes in a normal life. For me, I cultivate these attitudes doing combat training. Everybody can do it in different ways, but it's about facing off with it regularly and working on developing your resilience under pressure. So that is all I have for you. I'm going to post a survey in the chat because I want to hear about your experience. I want to hear if the content was something that you were able to receive from. I'd also love to hear if you felt overwhelmed. So I believe there's 4 questions on this survey. If you could take that, I would be so grateful. Up next, let me reshare my screen. We have, so next week's session, this is what I will be talking about, is information gathered by the Secret Service found That connection was the ultimate deterrent of mass shootings in schools. So we will be digging deeper into that next week. And we are proud to commit 5% of our annual profits to the Warrior Forge Project. And what they do is they empower women and children to, and they provide self-defense programs as well for women and children. And they have classes across the US and hopefully very soon across the world. They're on my website, which is reconnight.com. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn. Also my website, via email, any way that you can. And I'm so thankful for you all. Thank you again. I hope to see you all next week. I will remember to post the link, and we should be good to go. Be happy, be safe.